As corpses of Palestinian captives poured out of Israel torture dungeons, showing signs of torture and even lynching, CNN's Christiane Amanpour was forced by Zionist Big Brother to apologize for stating the obvious truth that Israel captives were returned home in far better condition. So they're releasing the hostages. Who is Hamas is? And I just want to remind you of these headlines. The cruelest form of torture. Freed Palestinians describe horrors of Israeli jail. So who do you think gets treated worse? The people who are being held by Hamas or the people being held in Israel? The Palestinians being held in Israel or the Israelis being held by Hamas? Turns out it's the people being held by Israel that are receiving way worse treatment than Hamas's hostages. Here's another one. Taken hostage by Israeli military. Freed Palestinian prisoners describe widespread torture. Freed Palestinian prisoners tell horrific grape torture in Israel detention. We all know that.
They all know it. They all are proud of it. They would never do that, but they're like, they'll do anything. You know, people that are pro-Zionist, they all do this.
Le Monde, I think this is a French newspaper, says in Israel prisons, hunger and torture are ever present. This is from Israeli returns Palestinian prisoners' bodies with signs of torture, mutilation, and execution. So they're returning dead people, dead bodies, to Hamas. And those Palestinian prisoners have signs that they were tortured, mutilated, and executed. Some of them had their limbs amputated because of the torture. Israel on Wednesday returned the bodies of dozens of Palestinians abducted during the Gaza genocide, showing signs of torture, mutilation, and execution. As one U.S.-based news site reported, a description consistent with the testimonies of former prisoners held by Israeli forces over the past 2 years. So far, Israel has returned 90 bodies, dead people, with more expected to be handed over soon as part of the ceasefire agreement reached with Hamas last week. So they killed at least 90 people while they had them hostage. Who did? Israel. Not Hamas. Israel did that. And they tortured them.
And they shot their own escaping hostages from Hamas. So that's how they treat their own people. What do you think they're going to do to the Palestinians?
100% right. They shoot their own. Israel shot their own hostages. Then let them go. The Gaza Health Ministry forensic team said that some of the bodies were blindfolded and bound and bore signs of torture similar to those seen on many of the living Palestinian prisoners freed by Israel on Monday. Some of the dead prisoners appeared to be victims of field executions, a war crime Israeli Defense Forces troops have allegedly committed against men, women, and children alike. Furthermore, Israel's Israel's obliteration of Gaza's healthcare and medical infrastructure is making it difficult for Palestinian forensic personnel to identify the bodies returned by Israel, which are in various states of decomposition. The horrific scenes visible on the bodies of the martyrs returned by the occupation, bearing marks of torture, abuse, and field executions, clearly reveal the criminal and fascist nature of the occupation army, meaning the Israeli army, and their moral and human decadence this entity has reached. We call upon international rights groups, foremost among them the UN and its Human Rights Council, to document these atrocious crimes, open an urgent and comprehensive investigation into them, and bring the occupation leaders to trial before relevant international courts, as they are responsible for committing unprecedented crimes against humanity in our modern history. Although warned by their Israeli captors against speaking out, Palestinians freed from Israeli imprisonment this week described being held in a slaughterhouse rife with torture and abuse, including beatings, electrocution, and being shot with rubber-coated steel bullets. Palestinians imprisoned by Israeli forces, including children, have described being raped and sex assault by male and female soldiers, electrocuted, mauled by dogs, soaked with cold water, denied food and water, deprived of sleep, and blasted with loud music. So they're torturing them. Dozens of detainees have died in Israeli custody, including one who died after allegedly being sodomized with an electric baton.
That sounds very cartelish, doesn't it?
Yes, it sounds very cartelish. IDF officers allegedly brought Israeli civilians into detention centers and allowed them to watch and film Palestinian prisoners being tortured. Israeli physicians who served at the notorious SDE Timan's torture prison also described widespread severe injuries caused by 24-hour shackling of hands and feet that sometimes required amputations. So they shackled them so hard that it cut off the blood, and then they had to amputate their limbs from the torture. Hamas's treatment of the Israelis it abducted during October 7th attack is more complicated, with some freed captives saying they suffered torture and other abuses, while others, especially those released early during the war, said they were treated relatively well. An Israeli Defense Force soldier captured after the rest of his tank crew were killed said that although he was tortured, his captors granted his request for religious materials, including a Torah. One woman even pushed back against Israeli media lies, claiming she was wounded by her captors, when in fact it was an Israeli airstrike that injured her. So far, Hamas has returned the bodies of 9 Israelis and other hostages. Israel is calling for Hamas to make all necessary efforts to find and hand over the bodies of 21 remaining dead hostages still unaccounted for. From TRT World, here is an 85-year-old Israeli hostage. She spoke after being freed by Hamas. Let's hear what she has to say. This was just a few weeks after October 7th, so circumstances no doubt have changed after Israel began bombing Gaza nonstop. Let's hear what she has to say. When we arrived here, they told all of us that they believed in the Quran and they wouldn't hurt us and that they would provide us with the same conditions they have in the tunnels. They took all of our they took care of all of our needs. I'll give them credit for that. They were very courteous. They made sure we were clean, that we ate. We ate the same food that they did. Pitas with cream cheese, melted cheese, cucumbers. Here she is thanking her captors, by the way. That's what that is. There was a meal for an entire day. There she is thanking her captors.
Wait, the same food they eat. So remember when that fat genius Randy Fine was like, starve them to death?
Yes.
While Israeli hostages are there eating the same food they eat?
Yeah.
So that sounds like the torture. You starving your own people.
Everything is legitimate. Israeli leaders defend soldiers accused of rape.
Not saying they didn't do it. Not saying they didn't do it.
They're not saying they didn't do it.
That's ISIS talk. I thought only the bad Muslims do that.
Here's hostages reveal horror of 2 years in Hamas. Really? Hostages were beaten unconscious, tortured, starved, chained up inside tunnels for months by Hamas in Gaza, family members of those released on Monday have said. As Israel continued to celebrate the return of 20 abductees, details have begun to emerge about their brutal treatment at the hands of Hamas. Anat Angrist, mother of abducted soldier Matam Angrist, told Channel 12 News that his son was severely abused following his capture from his tank on October 7th. He remembers being beaten so badly that he lost consciousness. They covered him with black sacks and dragged him away. Adding to the horror of his abuse at the hands of his jailers, Mr. Angrist also suffered repeated terrifying episodes as a result of Israeli airstrikes when the walls of the tunnels collapsed around him. So that's Israel killing their own prisoners again.
By the way, he's not a hostage. He's a POW.
That's right.
That's called a tank.
That's called a prisoner of war.
What the?
That's not a hostage.
The old lady was a hostage. This is a POW engaged in genocide.
Many times they found themselves buried under the rubble, trying to climb out and survive. The rubble of the Israeli bombs. Mr. Angrist's family already had some idea about the extent of his suffering due to the testimony of previously released hostages. They recounted how the soldier's chronic asthma and breathing troubles were exacerbated after his frequent violent interrogations by Hamas jailers. The mother of Elan Othel said he was chained in the same tunnel for almost the entire 2 years he was held captive, but added that 40 days ago, he was unexpectedly moved to a new tunnel located in the center of the Gaza Strip, a journey that took hours. Elkanah Bobat also spent most of his time in captivity chained in tunnels where he lost all sense of time and space. Despite this, he remembered his wedding day and demanded that he be allowed to take a shower in honor of the occasion. The Hamas guard initially refused, but then granted the request, according to reports. Evyatar David's father told Israeli media that his son had suffered both physical and psychological abuse during captivity. In August, Hamas released a video of him being forced to dig his own grave. His skeletal condition was compared to those of Holocaust victims and intensified calls for negotiations to be restarted on the basis that the hostages were gravely ill. He is thought to be losing sight of his right eye due to the incarceration. In arguably the most severe case of isolation, Aventon Orr was held alone for the whole 2 years and did not encounter any other captives until his release on Monday. He was reportedly held in tents rather than tunnels in one of the vast refugee areas of the central Gaza. He has lost between 30 and 40% of his body weight, according to reports. Kind of like how they're starving everybody in Gaza.
Yeah, the Holocaust, the Jews who were being murdered in the Holocaust were civilians. They weren't combatants who were engaged in genociding Germans. That was the big lie. So this is not really like the Holocaust. You're a soldier. Do you think we know Israel don't treat the foreign soldiers that well? Don't we know that much? So
this is from an Israeli newspaper. It says freed hostages say Ben-Gvir, which is their defense secretary, I'm pretty sure, his comments led to terrorists beating them unconscious with whips. Comments made by far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, or however you say his name, Ben-Gvir, about Palestinian prisoners led Hamas to worsen the conditions of the hostages in Gaza, including beating them with horsewhips until they were unconscious. Channel 12 News reports, citing comments by a hostage released earlier this week. We were subjected to severe abuse every time Ben-Gvir spoke out about the Palestinian prisoners, the unnamed former hostage reportedly says. Once he talked about food and they locked us in a cage and said we could eat one date and drink salt water, the freed hostage says. Once after he spoke on television, some terrorists came in with horsewhips and beat us until some of us lost consciousness. Earlier this year, released hostages also said that Ben-Gvir's behavior led to a worsening of the conditions in which they were held.
That's why he did that, because they need that.
They wanted them to do that. Channel 12 notes that defense officials warned Ben-Gvir on a number of occasions that his words and actions were to worsen the conditions of Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails could lead to the further mistreatment of those held in Gaza.
Well, they should have done that because that's why he did it.
Israel has returned the remains of 45 deceased Palestinians in shocking condition. Health officials say all of the bodies arrived with their hands and legs cuffed and came with numbers marking them instead of their names. Kind of like what they did to the Jews at the Holocaust. It's weird that the Israelis doing the exact same thing. Isn't that weird?
No, it's not. They live in 1948 in their head all day because it's a psychopathic golem created by maniacs.
Some bodies show signs of torture and summary executions, while others have been run over with tanks. That's what Israel did to their prisoners. Very serious statement. Gaza Health Ministry Director Munir El-Bursh, initial observations of the Palestinian bodies handed over by Israel show evidence of torture, binding, dissection, and some bodies were emptied and stuffed with cotton.
Like the Krampus myths of spooky Christmas in Western Europe? Jesus Christ.
Imagine the outcry if bodies of Israeli hostages had signs of torture, executions, handcuffing. It would be the front page of every newspaper and leading every news bulletin. But it's Palestinian bodies handed over by Israel that have those signs. So our media doesn't care.
Well, I'm sure Barry Weiss will get right on it.
This must be on the front page of every newspaper. It must be on every TV screen. This is one of the Palestinian bodies held hostage by Israel, returned through the International Committee of the Red Cross. This is one of the people CNN referred to as deceased. He was blindfolded, handcuffed, and hanged. So his hands are still handcuffed, and he was hanged, and they kept his body.
Do you remember early on, Jimmy, when the great Michael Rappaport, this is early on, he goes, I hate to say it, but I think the hostages are probably dead. And he kept pushing the hostages are probably already dead. Now, he's not smart enough to plan like that. That's what his controllers told him to say.
That's right.
Because they don't want them back alive. They never did.
Mm-hmm.
As corpses of Palestinian captives poured out of Israel torture dungeons, showing signs of torture and even lynching, CNN's Christiane Amanpour was forced by Zionist Big Brother to apologize for stating the obvious truth that Israel captives were returned home in far better condition. And here it is. CNN's Christiane Amanpour, hostages have probably been treated better than the average Gazan. Let's listen.
And I think for sure, people who start to talk to the hostages who've only just been released will find that it will take a long, long time for them to recover physically, but also mentally. It's been a terrible, terrible 2 years for them, because not only are they there, you know, they're probably being treated better than the average Gazan because they are the pawns and the chips that Hamas had. Now Hamas has given up all its leverage, by the way, by giving them all up. So that is a victory for the Israelis.
There you go. And here's what Layla Al-Arian says. Given that Palestinian hostages like Dr. Adnan Erbush were raped to death, while others have been tortured and starved, she told the truth for the first time. As Christiane Amanpour once said, be truthful, not neutral. Here she says, earlier live on air, I spoke about what a day of real joy this is for Israeli families whose loved ones are finally being returned from 2 years of horrific Hamas captivity, and for civilians in Gaza who have finally had a reprieve from 2 years of brutal. Let's listen to what she says.
Now, earlier live on air, I spoke about what a day of real joy this is for Israeli families whose loved ones are finally being returned from 2 years of horrific Hamas captivity, and for civilians in Gaza who finally had a reprieve from 2 years of brutal and deadly war. I noted that for the hostages who are finally home, it'll take a long time for them to recover mentally and physically. But I regret also saying that they might have been treated better than many Gazans because Hamas used these hostages as pawns and bargaining chips. But that was insensitive and it was wrong. From speaking to many former hostages.
So she told the truth. And now, so if you tell the truth, again, you never get in trouble for lying. You get in trouble for telling the truth.
That was insensitive and wrong. So that was prepared for her. And they said, you better say this right now.
You better say this.
And because she's worthless, she didn't go, fuck you, I quit, which anybody who's not an insane person should do.
And so she went out and she read the line that was written for her. I'm sorry. I apologize. It was insensitive for me to tell the truth on a news show. That's what you get from CNN, which is why people like us have a show. Wow. CNN couldn't get any worse. Let's see what else she had to say.
And their families, like everyone, I've been horrified at what Hamas has subjected them to over 2 long years. They've told me, as you've just...
But you're not horrified at what has happened to the people in Gaza, the ethnic cleansing and genocide that every human rights organization says is happening? You mean like that? Under an apartheid state? You mean like that?
No, she is. She takes it back, though, because her masters told her to.
Yeah, she takes it back.
Of course she's horrified. Who wouldn't be? But she's going to follow the rules like a real journalist.
How do you spell horrified? Is that with a WH? Because she's definitely doing this for money.
No, you're thinking of her old CNN series where she explores sex around the world? That's a real thing. It's called Horrified with Christine.
I'll see you in Irvine this Sunday, October 19th. We've added second shows in Australia so you could get tickets. We'll see you in Burbank the day after Thanksgiving. It's a Friday. Everybody's off. And then we'll see you in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, December 6th. We're also going to be January 11th in Waikiki at the Blue Note. Tickets not available yet, but coming soon. Make your vacation plans now. October 19th, we'll be in Irvine, California. We'll be in Australia. Then we'll be in Burbank, California the day after Thanksgiving. And then Pottstown, Pennsylvania, December 6th. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.